Hola a todos, bienvenidos a Party Pace Podcast. Hoy vamos a hablar bicicletas, por supuesto. Welcome everybody to the Party Pace Podcast, the transcontinental bike nerdery podcast. I'm Russ from currently in Girona, and today, once again, I'm joined by Nolan from California and the Ferg dog from Ritchey Bikes.
Yay!
Hey!
I didn't know it was going to be a multilingual. Gracias a todos y es un buen día por la conversación. Is that right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Bien hecho. Bien hecho.
I feel severely underprepared for this.
There's gonna be a quiz afterwards.
Oh no. We're both in trouble.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hopping on. So we've got our friend Ferguson from Ritchey here. I feel like most of our viewers know who you are, but for those that don't, like the two of them, can you tell us what you do over Ritchey and how long you've been there?
Yeah, great question. Well, I'm still figuring it out, and I've been there too long to still be figuring it out. No, I'm the U.S. marketing manager for Richie Design. I think it's getting close to 9 years now, having been here. Richie is I don't know if you guys saw the Radavis post, but Richie's a deceptively small team. And so in North America, there's only 6 of us. And in the office, there's 2 to 3 at any given time. And then globally, there's about 30 people that work for Richie. So knowing or having friends in other companies where their marketing team is about 30, we definitely do a lot and wear many hats to make it happen.
Yeah, it's pretty lean and mean. I feel like you guys have a kind of like an outsized impact or persona given like how small the team is.
Yeah, that's accurate. Of course, like Richie was I guess massive is maybe not the right word, but we're much larger, late 90s through early thousands. And then industries just changed. And yeah, we definitely punch above our weight and try to be as effective as possible, which is, it's hard, but I think we get it done. So
yeah.
That's part of the allure of the brand. It really feels like a small company. When you call, like someone answers. Like when you email, someone writes back right away. So it's really nice.
When you call, you might get me or someone that you've seen personally.
Right.
I'd like to say that we're perfectly medium sized, and we aren't this
extra medium, yeah.
Medium, yeah. We aren't this behemoth that can just like throw our weight around, but we aren't so small that we can be incredibly nimble. So it's a funny shape to be, but yeah, like you will get in contact with someone that you see directly. It's not just some faceless grom that you're writing into. So
sure.
Yeah.
And before Ritchey, Fergus is like a legend among legends. Like before Ritchey, you were doing other bike stuff your whole life, right? You had a project, I think, was it with Dustin a while back? And
so Dustin and I, like if you really want to go to the way backs, I feel like I've had a bike attached to me or associated to me since I was a little kid. And I have this very vivid memory of watching Greg LeMond win the Tour de France on ABC Wide World of Sports, if anyone else is old enough to remember that. But on the weekends, I would, watch cartoons diligently as it, and then after that, sports came on and it was the Tour de France, and just being so in love with that moment. And, that bike life really got solidified. My brother, who I looked up to, still do quite a bit. He got into bikes, and so of course, being a little brother, I got into them, and then it just I ran away with it. After college, I became a bike messenger for too long. And that's where I met Dustin Klein. And so he was always creative and making stuff and building stuff and, you know, being friends, like just being around that and that energy. Because I was like early, it was really second wave of track bikes. And so many people were doing things and making stuff. And, you know, this dude, Mike Martin, came around and we're like, what's going on? And then it turned into MASH. You know, we had no idea. And so we're all interconnected. And so now years later, you know, seeing who's still in it's really awesome. But yeah, Dustin and I definitely go way back.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that's about it. But yeah, before Richie, you know, normal stuff like working in some shops, just trying to like figure it out. You know, I knew that being a messenger, like if I didn't do something else, I would never do anything else. So I made a very conscious change to stay in bikes because I love them, you know, and here we are.
Very cool.
How long have you been into Randonneuring? Has that been for a couple of years?
I was just telling the story. So 2004, this dude named Joel Metz. Well, actually before then, I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm this huge Suntour nerd.
Nice.
And, you know, so I was building up bikes, and this was after Suntour went out of business, but Rivendell still had a lot of dead stock. And so I bought cranks from them for a bike project, and they sent a Rivendell reader along with it. And, you know, this is kind of like early pre-internet stuff. So like zines and magazines were still important. And I remember reading about Paris-Brest Paris and just thinking like, wow, that'd be cool. Like all day. Yeah. All right. But it was abstract. And then this bike messenger, Joel Metz, after I started being a messenger, he was encouraging messengers to do it. And he said, oh, it's like a long alley cat. There's checkpoints and right from point to point, you know. And I was like, oh, that sounds easy. And so I did the what's it called? The Point Reyes Lighthouse 200. And at the time, it was the longest ride I had ever done. So 200K is about 125 miles. And what's it called? I did it, barely finished. And I went home, ate a burrito, and then slept for 14 hours. I just thought, holy cow, that's nuts. And, you know, I done, cut to years later, you know, I'd done maybe a couple like light bike tours, but, you know, it's the pandemic and I had nothing to do but ride. There's no races or anything. So I just rode. And I always knew that PBP was a bucket list. And so I thought this is kind of the time to do it. So then I got very serious about randonneurs and base then. So 2021, joined SF San Francisco Randonneurs, and then started doing the qualifiers for PBP, which, you know, PBP was in 23, but you actually do your pre-qualifiers the year before. So for like 2-3 years straight, it was just a lot of riding, and just that's all I thought about was eating and riding and
Yeah, I feel like I discovered Randonneuring through either a Riv Reader or a Vintage Bicycle Quarterly magazine. And it seems like the most kind of romantic thing, right? Riding through the French countryside with like a Gilles Berthaud bag, eating like roast chicken out of it or something.
Just a little rotisserie inside.
Right.
You know what? That's 100% accurate, because during PBP, I was so like, I went from being so focused on like, I got to get this thing done, to realizing like, I'm tired, I can nap, and then having this romantic experience of like, it's a summer afternoon, I'm in the French countryside, I'm napping underneath a tree in the grass, you know, and I just, you know, I'd lay there and just kind of like chuckle, like, this is so silly and amazing. And very cool. Dream
So
come true.
Yeah, I have a question. Like when you're doing that kind of distance and that kind of time on the bike, it seems as much as a mental game as like a physical one. How do you keep your head in and not get bored or I don't know, wander too much?
You know, it's funny because I have this friend Pat Gaffney who is from Philadelphia, and he was a huge inspiration as well. And he's done PBP on a tandem many times. And I saw him a few years ago, and I said, Pat, I want to do PBP. How do I prepare? And he goes, oh, you just ride. It's like, what? He's like, oh, you just keep pedaling. But the physical is easy. You know, the physical part's like, you're right. It's a lot of like introspection. Randonneurs and cyclists in general are weird. But randonneurs are really weird, and people that spend a lot of time on bikes get really, really weird. And I've done so much in general, I do so much thinking on the bike and just always thinking and, chasing demons or running away from them.
Mhm.
But the one thing that happened during PvP that was really annoying was I got blinded by the light stuck in my head at maybe kilometer 700. So for a good 500K, I would sing just the chorus of Blinded by the Light, wrapped up like a runner in the night. But then change the words, like if someone passed me on the right, it was passing on the right. Douches will do it, get out of sight. It's like things like that. And just like the middle of the night, like zombie mode, like blinded by the,
Nice.
Yeah.
So it's mostly psychological then. Keep yourself occupied.
Yeah. And so many weird things will happen. Like I was telling this story recently, but I was riding and I was like falling asleep on the bike, but I had to get to the next control because I planned it poorly and I didn't have warm enough clothes to sleep on the side of the road. So I had to get to the control to sleep. And I was riding and, you're just kind of going through this forest in the middle of the night. There's no light pollution, right? So it's black. It's focused on this orb in front of me. And I see someone walk out into the road and then they're like, and I'm like, oh my God, there's ghosts. What the fuck? And then I get to where it is. There's nothing. And then I think like either there's ghosts or I'm hallucinating or both. They can't hurt you. So the next time I saw someone else walking to the road, I just thought, they can't hurt you. Just keep going. You're okay. And they're like, no, it's fine. I'm like, no, it's not fine. But yeah, that was the freakiest thing that's ever happened.
Wow. That's sleep deprivation then.
100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Or you had some like really powerful gummies or something.
I know my boss isn't listening, but I did microdose with some psychedelics earlier in the ride, but
a little bit of carryover then.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because like if you do it in a light enough amount, not that I should say I'm not advocating drug use, but if you do it in a light enough amount, what it does is it like kind of opens up the senses. So it's like saying it's a strong cup of coffee is a disservice, but it really like makes everything really heightened and aware, but I kind of went overboard. So it made the first like 300 really weird. But by this time things had mellowed out quite a bit.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, but having that having that experience when you're like almost on the verge of passing out probably gave you the adrenaline to push through. It probably woke you up real quick.
Yeah, definitely. It was just like, oh, I gotta hurry up. Like the rest. But,
what do you say to because that's like the extreme of like distance biking, at least in my opinion. So what do you say to the people who are like scared to sign up for like a century or, you know, a metric century, because I've always had problems with, I don't know, get in my head about, you know, I think I've got the fitness, but what if I don't? And I'll probably bonk, and who's going to come get me? And if it's like a remote ride out in the wilderness, you know, what happens when all these things run through my head.
For sure.
And so what do you say to the people who are like afraid and who like need that push?
It's a big deal, right? Like a long ride to many, many people is 20 to 30 miles, you know? I'll relay an anecdote. So Teo Boss is my favorite cyclist, and he's a very well-known track sprinter, did some track endurance. And then he went and joined the Rabobank team and was doing Pro Tour. And so when I met him at Tour California, I said, Teo, how do you go from, you know, being one of the best track sprinters in the world to doing Grand Tour races? You know, it's a huge discrepancy. And he goes, well, you just ride more. but so to elaborate on that, you just ride more, but you do sizable bites and chunks, you know, like it, you know, people think like, oh, I got to just go and do a century, but you don't. You work up to it and you do what's comfortable, you know, but you do have to have a day where you just shock the system, where you go a little bit beyond your means, and really it can be a little uncomfortable, but you test yourself, and then you realize like, oh, okay, that wasn't so bad. I can go a little bit longer. So, you know, maybe it's like you do 30, you know, 30 miles, another 30 miles. And then one day you do 70, you know, and that 70 feels awful. But then you realize like, oh, I could do that. Okay. Hundreds. Mm-hmm. So yeah, don't feel like you have to dive into the deep end. You can definitely dip the toe for.
Yeah.
What's the pace that people ride at? I mean, I know it varies, but there's like a minimum speed you have to keep, and like where do you fall in?
Yeah, so you're right. It's very different. For PBP, I went into it, thinking that I wanted to do about mid 60. So that's 65 hours total. That's including stops. And so I found that I was averaging about maybe about 30K an hour. So 18 to 19 miles an hour. And that was moderate. You know, the dude who won this year, he actually set the fastest time, and he finished in like, I want to say like 42, 43 hours. It's almost like a whole day. Wow. And he was hauling oats. I think his average speed was like 21, 22 miles an hour, which, you know, like coming from like a race background, like if I did a crit that averaged 22 to 25, you know, that's sailing. And so this dude, you know, he's averaging that for 2 days, you know?
Yeah. So, how much climbing is on the course?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Not much. I mean, relatively not much. It's a lot of rolling. There's no major climbs. I think, I don't know the total numbers. I'd have to look it up, but it's very manageable, you know? So it's not bad. Like that outer area of France, it's like a plain, and then the elevation you do is actually into the valleys of the farmland. And so if you're on the flats, it's pretty warm, and then you dip down into these little valleys and it gets quite cool. But yeah, it's nothing bonkers. It's not like doing like the Alps or anything like that.
For a ride that's that long, are you like budgeting your energy? Are you riding to power, or are you just going by feel, or no?
By feel. I mean, people nerd out and they do like power meters and all that kind of stuff. And I don't do that. I basically go by what I know I can push the pace at. So, yeah, it's a lot of feeling. And, you know, the first part starts out, it's like a proper road race, you know? So that like turned a switch in my brain. So I'm like, oh, I'm taking corners. I'm like fighting for wheels, you know, we're sailing. And then, you know, I realized about 200K in, like, this isn't really sustainable. So I found my own rhythm, which was like kind of messed up because it was fast enough to where I was always kind of passing people, but not so fast to where I was like catching onto a fast group and just really cooking.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and so it's kind of a little bit.
It took you. You're saying it took you 200K to realize you were going a little too fast.
Everything's so distorted, right?
Yeah.
Like I rode there from Antwerp. Like when I flew into Europe, I flew into Belgium, and I was staying at a friend's house in Antwerp, and I had a day, put my bike together, and then I was like, all right, riding to Paris to do a long ride.
Wow.
Which I thought was like, oh, that's okay. And then I find out that these friends of mine took the ferry over from the UK, rode to PBP, did PBP, and then rode home. That's really put me to shame here.
So when I think of Randonneuring, I think of kind of like the Jan Hein Rhaenyra's very classic lines kind of bike. Is that the reality, or are there lots of plastic bikes, or what's this ratio of like kind of the romanticized rando bike to the modern road?
Dude, it's everything. You know, the craziest thing that's out there are the human powered vehicles. You know, like the torpedo looking thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you'll be riding and you just hear this like, and they're just sailing by, like, and you just hear that horrible sound and you're like, oh, I better like move over. But it's funny, and talk a little bit about Ritchey here. We just released the Montello, and people are like, oh, that's not a Randonneur bike. It doesn't have 650B.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is like maybe 10% of the people that I saw at PBP were on 650s. A lot of 700s, but yeah, to answer your question, for me, because I love nerding out on bikes, it was a whole swath of bikes out there. Like there's a dude who had a Cervelo time trial bike, and he was like full like aero nerd, everything. And I thought that's not comfortable. And then there's people on like the old timey, like using a rod to like move the chain.
Nice.
Like you have a little
the cosplay bikes.
Yeah, everything in between. There's actually a surprising amount of carbon. Excuse me. It's the vibe that I get from the Euros is, they're doing these things like pretty quick, and they're trying to like jam through it. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised at how many different types of bikes there were, and just like, oh shoot, you're on that, like, okay. And yeah, pretty neat.
What sorry, we're just going off on the rails already on PBP. But what bike what was your setup? And also, do you know like the percentage of finishers? Does everyone finish, or is there a cutoff and some people get kind of booted?
Yeah. So this year was I think this year was the largest year of open registrations, which was 8,000. In the past, I think it was like 5,000. Mm-hmm. And of that, I think like 7,300 or something started, and then maybe just under 7 finished. So it's a pretty low attrition rate.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to figure that people who qualify, not everyone can make it. If you're qualifying in, I don't know, the Philippines, like that's a big trip, physically and economically.
Mm-hmm.
My setup, yeah, so leading into it, I thought I wanted to take my Carbon Outback, which is a breakaway, so I thought easy to travel with. And I was running that with a 1x setup. I was running our Butano bars that have a little bit of flare and a 40, and it was kind of like a pretty quick, comfortable bike. It was set up 1x, had a 48 in the front and a 1146 in the back, so kind of spicy. But I knew that if I can get through the climbs here, I knew that the climbs there would be easy. And so I was doing all of my qualifying brevets on that with the anticipation of that's how I do PBP. But in the background, because a little behind the curtain, or inside baseball, as people like to say. The year prior, I threw it out to the team like, hey, what if we did an endurance road bike, basically, knowing full well that what I was suggesting was the bike that I wanted for Brevet. I said, it should have a little lower bottom bracket because you want a corner on the thing, you want bigger tires, the stack should be a little bit more. It'd be cool if it had dynamo, all this stuff, sprinkling it throughout. And then maybe 7 months before PBP, our product manager was like, okay, we're working on samples. We got the drawings. I'm looking at the geometry charts. I'm looking at the drawings, and I'm just like, just like beside myself, but try to like be cool, like. Oh. And anyway, to cut to the chase, maybe 3 weeks prior, they say, hey, we're going to have samples done. So there are test bikes, but you can have one of them. I was like, okay. And 10 days before I left, I get the bike, and there's something, it wasn't right. It was a full electronic bike, so no braze-ons for anything. So this group that I had that I wanted to use on it was useless. And so I now had to scramble, find an electronic group set, build it. I did 2 200K shakedown rides, which are very long rides to do on a brand new bike, but it just felt awesome. And I was like, okay, great. So I had confidence. So yeah, I basically flew to Europe on a brand new bike, and I had it for maybe 2.5 weeks before I did PBP on it. And then that was with Axis. So I ran 3650 double in the front with 3450, and then the back was 1034. And then I ran these Goodyear tires, the Goodyear F1 in a 35, and same thing, 40 cm Butanos. And then I gave some feedback to the team, and I was like, made some tweaks, and the bike that you saw at Sea Otters is the result.
So you basically wrote a prototype of the Montello.
100%.
Nice.
Here's the thing, like, I'm no one special, but for some reason people follow me. And so I posted a photo on the grams, like, hey, and in the back was my bike. Well, some nerd screenshot that and put it on this Facebook group that was like for the Outback. And people were like, oh, is Fergus riding a new Outback? And everyone's like speculating, and I'm like sitting there with the popcorn, like, nerds, and people were just going off. But because the product wasn't even like totally announced, I didn't feel like it was right to talk about it too much. So I just kind of let people's imaginations go with it. And it is pretty funny to see what people were thinking. But
that was a strategic marketing decision.
There you go. Fergus, a hype beast.
I do have a sneaker collection, yes. But yeah, so yeah, very much a prototype. And people that I met in Europe, they'd look at the bike, and I'm like, oh, what is it? And I would tell them, pretty frankly, and they're like, oh, okay, all right. And no, it's pretty cool, and to be totally frank, like, I feel so lucky, to have that be part of my job. Like, I get paid to do this. Like, don't tell anyone, but I would do it for free. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, what changes you suggested from the prototype to the final?
Increased stack is one. Ritchey is pretty notorious for being very like racy, so the stack is pretty low, even on something like the Outback. I think that gets noticed a lot. So they're slowly making those changes. So I wanted a little bit more stack. There are like some key features that are very like specific, I think, to like bike touring. So if you're using a frame bag, making sure that your water bottle mounts are as low as possible. It does two things. It lowers that weight, right? But also makes it so you have clearance to pull out bottles. And I asked for the chain stays to be a little bit shorter. I'm not wild about tucking wheels, but I noticed like on climbs, it wasn't soggy, but I thought it could be a little snappier. So they aren't short chain stays by any stretch of the imagination, but they're shorter than they were. So those are the two main changes, but everything else was pretty spot on from the gun.
Cool.
Yeah. And so that bike, it been through everything. Like I did this thing called the Flandrian Challenge in Belgium, and it's like this self-run thing, but basically you do 61 of these classic secteurs. They're in the spring classics. So, cobbled sections, cobbled bergs, and you can do it as like a 3-day, 4-day, or I decided to do it as a 1-day. So in my brain, I'm like, oh, it's 300 kilometers. That's nothing. This elevation looks like nothing. And I get out there, and what I very quickly realized was like, pros that are doing this are sailing over it. And these climbs, they start out easy and then just go, oh my God. And every climb was just brutal. And it wasn't the bike's fault that I didn't finish, because it actually held up very well over all of it. And I got maybe 270K, and I was like, I can't finish this, or I can, but it'll be midnight and I'll miss the last train. So I failed. I totally failed that ride. But I did that, and then I went out and did this gravel race ride with some friends outside of Leuven. We did the European Gravel Championship course. So I show up on Montello, and a couple of the guys are like looking at the tires, like, "You gonna be all right in this thing?" I was like, and so we're jamming along and just sailing through this section, and the mud there gets like compact, so it's like hard packed with this thin layer of mud above it. And I went into this like chicane thing and just hit it weird, and I was like sliding like this. And I was like, "Oh, is this the end of the Ferg dog?" And then like upright. And my buddy was like, "Oh yeah, that's some good riding." And I was like, "Yes." But afterwards, people were like, "Oh dang, like that! Wow, cool! Like this bike can do this." I was like, "Yeah," So definitely got to show off quite a bit with the thing, and that also was pretty cool. Enjoyed it.
Nice. Should we pivot to Sea Otter recap? That was what was advertised, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and let's see, we got 150 people in the chat. If you guys have questions for Fergus about Ritchey or PBP or Sea Otter, put in the comments, and then if it's good, then we'll ask them. Yeah. So how was Sea Otter?
Sea Otter was it was great. This is my 8th Sea Otter with Ritchey. Pandemic aside, right? So and it was busy from the get-go. Thursday, it's like kind of industry, so a lot of media, it's like first day of school kind of stuff. So seeing old friends that I haven't seen in a while. And then, the response to the bikes was very positive, and I'm always blown away when someone enjoys anything Ritchey, and they come and let me know. Like, I think it's so sweet and wonderful. But also people that enjoyed the Montebello, because I have so much of me tied into it, was really cool as well. And so that felt great. But the whole weekend went by really, really quick. and it was just overwhelming. Like, it wasn't until Sunday when it finally died down that I actually got to walk around and see anything. By then, everyone's burnt out. It's just haggard, like, the battlefields of World War I. Like, oh my goodness.
Did it feel busier or as busy as when all three of us were there like 2 years ago?
The show in general busier. Of course, when we were all at the booth last year, like, there's a lot of attention because, of course, you guys were there, and it was cool. It was a great like meeting spot. So that day felt just like bonkers. And I think Tom was there another day, and anytime Tom shows up, it's just mayhem. For a lot of reasons, but it's but in general, the show felt much busier and many more people, and a lot more brands were there. It's really become this like industry, like necessary for the industry to connect with other industry, connect with media, and then get that public exposure and that feedback. So, yeah.
How about the other offering, the P29er?
Oh, that.
That thing, yeah. I'm pretty excited about that one.
That bike's awesome. And it's, we have the Ultra, which is like, it's very all mountain, big tires, 2-wheel size. I think you had asked me about this. And, we got to thinking, like, I think there's kind of a growing desire for a fast off-road cross-country bike, something that's nimble and just fun, something you can really jam around on. And then one of the things I'd noticed on sites like Bike Packing was people are taking hardtails and they're doing tours on them, and you look at like Tour Divide, and it's a pretty good mix of mountain bikes, drop bar mountain bikes, big tire gravel bikes, a couple cross bikes for some reason. And so, we made some updates to the P29, so dropper post, boost spacing, like kind of modern stuff, but kept the geometry and that kind of light feeling there. And so as a pure cross-country bike, I think it hits on the mark. But one thing that I wanted to do was show its versatility. So I put drop bars on the one that I rode. And so I have a drop bar front suspension version of it. And it was a ripper, and just my background and my comforts with drop bars, and so being on a bike like that made it kind of a lot of fun for me. Things that I would be more hesitant to do on a gravel bike or cross bike, I was able to take on. And then we have another build that I did that's like full rigid, and that one's supposed to be like truly like bike packing adventure bike. So but yeah, the response to that was pretty cool. People are like, what's this old bike? It's like, no, we brought it back like it's new, and yeah.
Can you give us the history on the P mountain bike?
So P is short for project. And all of those project bikes were like kind of team issue. And so, like if you see a P team, most likely it's fillet brazed by Tom, and he would have made that for the team themselves or team members. So those would all be pretty unique. And the idea was it'd be as light and functional as possible. And then we get into bikes like the P21 and P23, and the numbers refer to how much it would weigh as a complete bike. So, a 21-pound mountain bike's pretty light. What's interesting is on the down tube of some of those bikes actually has like a weight restrictions, but it's like ridiculous. It's like someone who's like 6 foot and weighs 150 is like the max. I'm like, wow, what kind of noodles riding this thing? It's just these insanely light, fast mountain bikes. And when Ritchey decided to do frames as an offering again, we had two P bikes. We had a P650B, or at that time is the P650B, and then later became the 27.5, and then the P29. So it's just a throwback to those earlier bikes, kind of keeping with that whole like project kind of idea. Yeah, and now it's just kind of this name that's stuck, and people, there's that recognizability of it, association with Ritchey. Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm interested in, what you guys think of something like that, like you're both kind of in that, I don't know, alt biking world. Like, is that a bike that seems to resonate with you? Is the idea of like a versatile mountain bike like that?
Yeah, I've been digging the whole resurgence of the notion of like an ATB, which is kind of the spiritual successor of the 90s mountain bike. Like if it progressed, but still maintained like the simplicity that people romanticize it with, like what would that bike look like today? So a rigid version of that sounds pretty awesome. Yeah, just kind of straddling that line of, more bike than a gravel bike, but less bike than, like a full suspension mountain bike, or that's just a lot more versatile.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm starting to converge. Like my whole life, I've been all over the place with bikes, BMX, mountain bike, downhill, road, strictly road, and everything in between. But lately, like the carbon Santa Cruz Hightower, man, that's been sitting there for almost a year, I would say.
Wow.
And so I've almost been strictly riding the the hardtail. But the hardtail is right now it's the Kona. It's got a 140 fork on it.
Ooh,
Even that
rest in peace, Kona.
Yeah.
Well, even that I'm starting to feel like, I feel like I'm almost over biking in every scenario. And so I'm starting to kind of bring it down, see what I can get away with. And like a shorter travel, lighter weight hardtail is sounds to me much more appealing these days. And then at the other end of the spectrum, like I feel like the carbon bikes in the stable are just dropping off like flies and getting replaced by, metal, more relaxed drop bar kind of geometry. So I don't know where this is taking me, but it feels like it's like congealing a little bit in the middle here.
Yeah.
If I can get on my soapbox for a little bit, that there really is something to be said for underbiking, in that when I was a kid, my first mountain bikes, there's no suspension. And I remember when suspension came around and my brother got a suspension fork and I made fun of him. I was like, you're sissy, like, oh, you've gotten soft, you need suspension. But the beauty of a rigid mountain bike or even a low suspension mountain bike is it teaches you to take lines. I think it keeps you out of trouble. If you don't have that background in off-road riding, getting on a full squish can really quickly put you in situations that maybe you aren't comfortable with or don't know how to handle. And then, full suspension allows you to do it faster. So now you're sailing into scenarios. It's like, if you don't have the vocabulary to address it, you very quickly could hurt yourself, I think. So, getting people on rigid bikes or low travel bikes, I think makes them better riders, and then it's like, okay, if I can do this, rock series on a rigid, okay, now I can really have at it if I go full squish.
Yeah.
Usually what I advocate to new mountain bikers, if they have an option to do something like that.
I think maybe Raul probably nailed it on the head here.
He said, "Oh yeah," he said.
Oh.
They're converging onto dad bike is what's happening.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Yeah.
I mean, that's not inaccurate, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I'll just say, because we showed it at Philly, so we have a track bike in the works, and there's a whole story behind that. But a lot of my messenger stuff in San Francisco is on a track bike, and that's the whole city. And bombing hills and doing all that stuff. when you're like a mid-20s person, it's exhilarating. But being like a middle-aged dude now back on a track bike in the city with no brakes, I'm like, oh golly, this is scary. Like, how did I do this? You know, and then thinking like, oh, how can I take the flatter way around this hill? You know, yeah, getting older. As a PSA, it sucks. So I'm trying not to do it.
Yeah.
But
that sense of mortality.
Yeah.
Something, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's
probably, that's it too. I've gradually, I tend to blame it on my kids, but I think a lot of folks our age, suddenly you just become a wuss, or at least for me over the past 5 years. You know, I don't like, whereas normally I would just send something and say, oh well. Now I'm like, no, I gotta take care of kids when I get home and all that.
Yeah.
So
for me, I've realized that I like bikes, but I also like other things. And like I need my body to do those other things as well.
Right.
Yeah. I stopped mountain biking because I got scared. Like, to be honest, you know, I was riding Downeyville and I was just like, this is scary. You know, the kind of mountain biking that I like to do, I could do usually on my cross bike, and that's fine. You know, it's if I fall, most likely I'll get skinned up. I won't, you know, end up down a ravine or in some crevasse. You know, it just looks so scary to me.
Yeah. So you got a chance to walk the Sea Otter a little bit, sounds like, on Sunday. What popped out to you that seemed interesting?
You know, the stuff that's interesting to me is it's nothing too wild, you know. The one thing that I really enjoyed seeing was Omnium there. Those Omnium bikes I think are so cool. And they make a truck bike. I think it's the Mini V3 or something. And to me, that's like the perfect city bike, you know, because the footprint is still similar to that of a road bike. The capacity of it is massive. So, you know, if you're, you know, a grocery getter, it's perfect. You know, you don't have to worry about parking or, you know, traffic or anything. And you can still, you know, bring all these things home with you. As far as a utilitarian vehicle, I think it's such a great bike, and seeing more and more of them in the States I really love it. And to me, what that signifies is more people are understanding that they can do things by bike, you know? And so, you know, I hope that we get to a point where people feel more comfortable on the road because there's more people on the road. You know what I mean? Like, people feel uncomfortable because it's like, oh, there's too many cars. But if there's kind of like this growing critical mass of people that get out of cars and into bikes that are useful, that's so sweet, you know. So yeah, seeing those guys was really awesome. Kind of wandering around and just getting a load of what brands are doing what. Like, I don't think this is anything too crazy, but I just learned that the Waltons invested pretty heavily into Trek. So there's a lot more tie-in with Rafa, Trek, and that whole world. Interested to see what happens with that. You know, Rafa's like one of those brands I've actually never been mad at. Even when they were an elitist brand, I appreciate that they owned that elitism, because it didn't exist before. You know, we had either like some Pro Tour knockoff kit or a Cookie Monster kit for performance. And Rafa was like elevating the sport. But now they've become, I think, quite accessible because the price.
Well, now there's Pan Normal that's kind of taken the place of Rafa, I think.
Yeah, which, you know, good for them. You know, am I going to go out and buy a Bugatti and then put my $15,000 S-Works in the back? No, but there's a market for those people. And so if Paul Normal is going to address that, great. But if there's, you know, brands that, you know, like Ornat and Volair and now Rafa that can address like people like us and make it affordable and make kit that is fits well and you know helps you ride longer. Great, and I love seeing it. So yeah, that's definitely a positive. The new Husky I think is really cool. Like man, those guys are so awesome, and I really love what they do. And you know, talk about a fun bike that is also very versatile. You know, and that kind of versatility is more appealing to me now. But you know, I got a chance to go and ride with those guys a few days after the show, and they're just ripping on these things, and it looks so cool. And they're rigid, they're running rigid, you know, rigid with a dropper post, and it's like, dang, that's awesome. And for Sea Otter NorCal, it's kind of the perfect bike to get away on. So yeah, those are probably the biggest highlights for me.
Omnium is a brand that's are they local to you, Russ, or you just happen to get one?
They're not in Spain. I forget where they're
out of Denmark.
Yeah.
Copenhagen.
So was this their, I don't know, was this their like one of the first Sea Otters, or is it like, or is it just coming over to the US market now, or have they been there?
It was niche, very niche at first. And you kind of just see them here and there, like the Bullet. This might be their first like actual Sea Otter show. Yeah, I'm not totally sure, but you know, their presence in Europe is pretty decent.
So I wonder if that's go ahead.
Yeah, I'm reviewing the Mini Max, which is a big, slightly longer than the Mini, but it's the Mini that would work best for me personally, just because we live in
the front wheel, right, that is operated by
it's got the linkage, but it's not the longest one. It's somewhere in between. It's very similar to like the Blinky I used to have, but like you said, like the Mini I think is a great fit, especially in Euro buildings. It's got this tiny elevator, and every time I take the Mini Max down, I have to hit the front brake, tip it up like this, and then make sure that the wheel doesn't catch on the door as it closes. And it feels like I'm like cheating death every time I get it safely down. But like the Mini would be perfect because it's a little bit, it's a little bit more manageable, a cargo bike.
Do they make an option for like a pedal assist on that?
They do.
Or cool.
Yeah. I think there's assist options for all the sizes.
Yeah, you know, maybe this is kind of a hot topic, but I'm not mad at pedal assist or e-bikes anymore. I used to think like, oh, these people are lazy, but you know, you pair something like a pedal assist with that Omnium, and at least in San Francisco, dude, that's clutch. You know, it's like it makes getting up the hills manageable, you know, especially if someone's not like some crazy nutso cyclist. Like, oh, cool. Now they can do all those errands and like get around the city efficiently and effectively.
Yeah.
It's a great application for it. I wish that, you know, corporations would kind of take advantage of that mindset, you know, and maybe offering a fleet or service that people could use something like that.
Yeah.
So, cool. Yeah, I'll look forward to your review of that bike.
Yeah, I'll be a little sad to give it back. It's been so useful because we'll get we'll order stuff from the Barcelona IKEA, and then they send it to a satellite pickup spot. So I'll bike there and strap all the IKEA over to the apartment, and so that's how we've been slowly furnishing the place. Dude,
there's nothing like having a driver give you a wide berth when you have a couch on the front of your bicycle. You know, talk about giving you room. You know?
Yeah, I think the most awkward thing I've carried was like a park bike repair stand, and you know, I had to kind of stick it sideways. So that was an adventure.
Oh, that's great. I don't have access to that. I don't know if there's any questions or anything I can address from anyone that.
So let's see. Someone that asked Montebello and rim brake ¿Por qué no?
I like your gesture avatar. Rim brake, yeah. Reason why not? The market, people just don't buy it. Like the Swiss Cross Canty is my favorite Ritchey, and I was so upset in the meeting when they're like, "Oh, we're discontinuing this bike," and I flipped over a table, stormed out the room like a child. But the numbers just weren't there to justify it. As far as, like, I get it, you know. Most of my personal bikes are rim brake bikes. They're easy to work on and they're light, but it's unfortunate because the market just they're full disc brake now, and you know, there's nothing wrong with it. They work great. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is the kind of person that works on a bike themselves is diminishing, or there's so many new riders that don't know how to work on bikes that they're happy to just take their disc brake bike into the shop and have someone else deal with it.
All right. Jack says, "Bring back the carbon bull moose."
Dude, I've been trying. It, you know, like coming from this. So, long story to get to the answer of this question. Before I worked at Ritchey, my good friend Dave Law worked here, and I would be on standby, and I'd go into the newsstand and I'd look through the cycling magazines and I would see these ads for Ritchey, and they sucked. You know, it was like a picture of a stem and then some BS copy underneath it. And I would call him up while he's at work and I'd be like, "Hey, your ads suck. I want to see some dude just like shredding balls and like get me hyped to ride a bike." And he's like, "Oh, no." And, you know, from the outside, to me, it was like, oh, it's just that easy to do these things. In the case of the bull moose, you know, I thought, well, why can't we just do this? But, you know, it's like this is boring, but it's this ratio of like, do the sales numbers justify it? How many would we have to produce? How much does it cost to produce it? You know, and every couple of months, I know my coworkers are like rolling their eyes, and I go, "Hey, what if we do the carbon bull moose?" All right, Fergus. All right. And then, you know, they kind of sweep it under the rug. And then, you know, maybe 6 months later, I go, "Hey, people are asking about the carbon bull moose." So, Jack, at the next meeting, I promise I will bring it up and annoy my coworkers again with it.
There you go. Let's see. So Woodward Checker asks, "Why are Ritchey bikes so hard to get in Europe and Ritchey parts are all over the place?" How is your distribution in Europe? Is it good penetration or?
Yeah, I think it depends on where you are. We have warehouse in Germany, and you know, we ship all over Europe. Not EU. The UK is hard to get into because of Brexit and the tariffs getting in there. That's difficult. But if to answer your question, ask your local bike shop. We do have stocking dealers in Europe, and you know, if you happen to live that area, you could always go there. If you go onto our website, we have a really good preferred dealer locator. And you know, not to give you the whole spiel, but these are shops that really believe in Ritchey, really believe in steel bikes, and that kind of ethos that I think all three of us, and as well as Ritchey, kind of believe in. And so, yeah, if you go through our website and look at our preferred dealer, you can get one through there. Otherwise, ask your local bike shop. It's pretty easy to give us a call and order one. But you know, again, we're so medium sized, we can't be in every shop, and not every shop's going to stock frames with the hopes that like someone's going to walk in and be like, "Oh, great, build me a Ritchey." And you know, of course, I would love for everyone that wants a bike to get one. Like, I'm also kind of fine with it being a little bit more of a, you have to do the legwork to get it. So we aren't just like flooding the market, you know, with like thousands of these things. So then your bike's truly special for you.
I know that Eat Sleep Cycle here in Girona is a Ritchey dealer, and they have some frames. So that's, If you're going to have it in the shop in Girona, that's the shop to have it in.
Yeah. No, they're awesome. You know, they do really cool stuff. I don't know. You've seen them in person. I've only seen them online, but their online presence is cool, and looks like the rides they're doing are cool. The builds are super sweet. So, yeah.
So we got a question here from Gravel Bike California. What would have you wanted to see Otter?
Man, good question. You know, we only go to like two to three shows a year. We went to Philly Bike Expo. We'll go to Made, and then we're at Sea Otter. They're all different, and there's a reason for going to each of them. You know, like Philly is such a pure consumer show, but you get all kinds of people there, from like, you know, mom and dad that are just like, oh, we ride on the weekends and want to check out this thing, to like really hardcore cyclist weirdos. And it's a really great show that way. And Bina does such a great job with it. If you're on the East Coast and it comes around, highly recommend going. Sea Otter is, you know, people go for that new stuff, that new launch. It's a lot of like off-road vibes, real mountain bike centric. And of course, Made is, you know, not eye candy, but custom bikes. They're very drool worthy. There's a pretty broad diversity to the brands that go to Sea Otter, to the point where some of them are just like, what are you doing here? Like, wow, okay, you know.
There's some weird stuff like hiding in the corners of Sea Otter.
Oh yeah. What was one? One was like a neck pillow thing. I was like,
sure. I mean,
yeah,
cyclists gotta sleep.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a very good person to ask, because I get so overwhelmed and just worn out from talking to people that by the time I'm walking around, it's kind of like zombie mode. But I think most things I would want to see are there. It's rare that, you know, I go and I'm like, oh, Cannondale wasn't there. I didn't get to squish the lefty up and down, you know. So,
yeah.
So, sorry, good answer for you.
So Mass Produce asks, can you disclose colorways on the Montello?
Did you know, I just learned this from Jeremy Dunn. When you say Smith, you have to say Smith. So just like that, Montebello is the proper pronunciation.
Bella Orange. Durace.
Durace, yeah.
Yeah, so the color is coming out in Tapatio Red. That's the first color that's out there. And
it's all those stickers. Is that what you're gonna find?
Yeah, I hope I had a prop, but I don't. I'm woefully underprepared. I'm sorry, but so yeah, that's the first color, is hot sauce red.
Nice.
We'll call it Tapatio until someone sends me an angry email. But
Cholula.
That's the follow-up. Yeah. And then, you know, on the subject of colorways, the P29, that colorway is called Dirt in Blood.
All right.
So
aggressive, yeah.
Yeah.
Very metal.
Yeah.
So Alex here asked us a couple times, so I'll throw it up. How accurate is the P29 geo over at bike? I'm assuming bikepacking.com.
If they have the geo posted, yeah, that should be accurate. They got the info sheet that we send out to media and dealers. So yeah, there's all those geometries are final. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we got almost 200 people in the chat. If you've got any last minute questions for the Ferg dog, put them in the comments.
I'm open for all of it.
There you go.
You know, the funny thing, I don't know if anyone else talks about this, but you know, I don't do these very often. So I was like, oh, what do I wear? You know, my hair to the side. And I was looking for a backdrop, and I thought, well, the record collection's okay. And then I thought of that scene from Anchorman where he goes, I have many important books. But these are my.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I've got a question. As a extra medium sized company that like I think is less like they're less commodity products, like there's like real strong brand attachment to Ritchey. Are you guys faring okay during this bike apocalypse that's happening, or?
Yeah, the bike apocalypse. Cyclopolis. Yeah, you know what? We lucked out, or we're very thankful that, you know, we hit all of our numbers from last year, and you know, it's like right on the dot. It's not like we did gangbusters, we weren't suffering. And you know, I'm, aside from one other person, I'm the youngest person on the team. And you know, being in my early 40s, like it's kind of weird, but I'm thankful for the experience of my coworkers, because they've all been there 10 plus years. And so there really are these kind of like cycles that we go through, and you know, especially like in the US right now, being an election year, you know, sales always dip because everyone's kind of waiting.
Right.
And so because of that experience, we were able to be pretty prudent with how we spent our money. And you know, someone was observing that we have 6 new products coming out this year. Some are kind of revamps of existing lines, and some are truly new products. And it's pretty rare for us to do that, but it also is an indicator that we're always thinking, all of us ride, you know, and that those rides really do inform the product. Like the Montello, like I was saying, it was inspired by riding a dang bike. And you know, the handlebars that we come out with are from like being on a bike and like, no, I want it to actually like, you know, and so we're able to kind of keep on doing that by being very careful with how and what and where we do things. And yeah, I don't know how often I say it, but I can't say it enough. Like, very, very thankful for my coworkers, and our communication is very good, and I can rely on them as much as they can rely on me. And you know, we try to do right by, you know, our audience as well. So it's a bunch of things that come together at once to make it happen.
Cool. So Jay Howard asks, the baguettes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this tongue-in-cheek thing, right? I mean, I also had my PBP finisher water bottle that you get at the end.
There is a hashtag casual baguette.
No way, really?
There is, yeah.
Oh my God. There goes my afternoon. You know, like
safe for work, SFW.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. You know, going into PBP, you know, all of my other randonneurs were like, oh, the baguettes, you pull over, you have a nice baguette. Oh, it's crunchy. And so it was like maybe like 6:30 in the morning on the second day, and I'm riding through this little town, and this bakery just opened. I was like, oh, I'll get baguette, you know. So I go in there, I'm like, yeah, baguette. I bite into this thing, and I was just like, cotton mouth, like, it's just bread, you know? And I was just like, what's going on? I was really disappointed, but it's just an easy food to like have, right? So yeah, just a fun accessory to have on the bike. Definitely got a lot of attention. You know, people were coming by like, what's going on here, baguettes?
Nice. Yeah. Let's see. Another question here. Average Ben cycling. Why are Ritchey carbon rails slightly different than other carbon rails? Standard seems to be 7x9.
Yeah, it's like the Smiths song, some girls are bigger than others, and some girls' mothers are bigger than others' mothers. So, um, it's kind of like generic, 7x9, 7x10, 7x9.6. They're all that oval carbon. It's just a manufacturing thing. Actually, it's a marketing thing. Most of those saddle rails are made by the same company, so it's not like really that different. But when it comes to, if you're fitting like our 1 bolt clamp on a seat post, if it's 7x9 through 10, it works on there just fine. Ours are a little bit different, but that's okay. Everyone's a little bit different. So,
cool. Anything you want to end on, Nolan?
No, this was just really interesting to hear Fergus's take on all this stuff. Fergus is so cool. He just oozes. He just oozes coolness. I can just sit here and listen to stories. You have to pardon me if I wasn't as talkative this time, because it was just interesting to hear your take on everything.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to have you down for another Ritchey event here in SoCal.
Dude, that was awesome.
Yeah, that was really fun.
Thank you for organizing that, and thank you for everything. That was so much fun, and as I have a few friends down in SoCal, so it's cool seeing them, but then just meeting new people and like asking people about their Ritcheys and just who they are, and it's a good excuse to get to know others. And
yeah. We'll plan on maybe come fall or something, we'll do another one.
Very into it. Yeah, that was great. Yeah. And yeah, your buddy that did the food, like that food was really awesome. So yeah, if we can do a plug for that event, if you happen to be in LA when it happens, it was well worth it. Yeah. So
yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I got nothing else for you, folks.
All right, I'll take us home. Thanks, Fergus, so much for being on the live stream. Thanks everyone for hanging around. We've got like 184 people still in here. Cool. Before you guys rush out, like a movie theater on fire, hit that like button and share it. It helps out the channel. Yeah. Follow Nolan on the Bike Talk channel if you don't already. Give Richie and the Ferg Dog a follow on the grams. And any last words, Fergus?
I wish I had something really poignant to say. I would have written it down, but just thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks to everyone that sends in notes, and positive and negative. Even the people that are like, "Yeah, you suck." Like, there's something to be gleaned from it that if we can make their experience better, like we definitely learn from it. So yeah, thanks everyone that takes the time to write in. I definitely see all of it and try to help where I can. So, but yeah, thanks you guys. I really enjoyed catching up with you, and it's good to see you. And yeah,
likewise.
Cool. All right, everyone. Good night, and as always, keep the supple side down. All right.